ready to go.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone. We will now call the meeting of the Authority Board to order. Please join me in listening to a short video.
Sorry about that. I want to make sure I share the sound.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of Assembly Bill 361, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the Ccta website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should mute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice for public comment guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Okay, thank you. Terry Ann, will you please conduct the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Arnrich? Did not see him. Okay. Commissioner Butt?
Here.
Commissioner Glover?
Here.
Commissioner Haskew?
Here.
Commissioner Hudson?
Here.
Commissioner Mitchoff?
Here.
Commissioner Nowak?
Here.
Commissioner Thorpe?
I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner White?
Here.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Here.
Chair Geringer?
Here.
Representative Allen?
Here.
Representative Powers?
Here.
Representative Worth?
Here.
Commissioner Arnrich? I saw a few coming in. Don't think that was him. Okay, so everyone is present except for Commissioner Arnrich.
Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. And since Commissioner Arnrich isn't here, Vice Chair Kelly, would you be so agreeable as to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? So if everyone else will mute your mics, please.
Thank you, and put your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I have to remember that I muted my mic as well. Thank you, Vice Chair Kelly. And the next item on our agenda is public comment. And Terry Ann, did we receive any written public comment for items not on the agenda?
No, we have not received any written public comment.
Okay, if there are any members of the public who wish to speak to the Authority Board about an item that is not on the agenda, please raise your hand at this time. And I don't see anyone. Do you, Terry?
No hands raised.
Okay, so then we will move on. We do not have any presentations this evening, so that brings us to the consent calendar. Are there any changes or comments from the Authority Board members? I don't see hands raised. Terry Ann, did we receive any written public comment on the consent calendar?
No written public comment.
Okay, if there are any members of the public who would wish to speak to any item on the consent calendar, now is your opportunity. If you'll please raise your hand. Terry Ann will note that and call on you.
No hands raised.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay. And so we have a motion by Commissioner Thorpe and a second by Commissioner Haskew. Terry Ann, thank you for conducting the roll call vote.
You're welcome. Okay. Commissioner Arnrich is still absent. Commissioner Butt,
Yes.
Commissioner Glover,
Yes.
Commissioner Haskew,
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak,
Yes.
Commissioner Thorpe,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Chair Geringer.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Arnrich absent.
Great, thank you, Terry Ann. So we'll now move on to regular agenda items and begin with agenda item number 8. The first two items for the Administration and Projects Committee are related to the Interstate 680 State Route 4 interchange improvements and Phase 3 widening. The first item is an informational item provided by Ivan Ramirez, giving us a status update. And hello, Ivan, and welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Ivan Ramirez, and I'm the Director of Construction for the Authority. And as the Chairwoman stated, I do have an item that will provide update on the construction project, the 680 interchange, 680, Interstate 680 State Route 4 project. So let me get my PowerPoint going here. Maybe I will share it here in a second. So this issue here. Okay, hopefully it'll be coming through here quickly.
We can see it. There you go.
Okay, apologize for that. It's always a little bit of a task getting this going. So the project began on November 14th, 2018. Since then, we have awarded 120 days of no working days. What that means is that contractor couldn't work due to weather, primarily rain, and the days after rain, since they cannot access the site because of the heavy mud and so on. And also there's been some fog days. And we have encountered numerous issues, some of which I already provided information to the board a couple of times in the past, and I'm going to continue that today. So way back in 2018, when the project got going, the board approved resolution 1859P, which provided a series of line items that total $97,702,223, and that was the total construction allotment for the project. So I'm going to give you a little update on some of the things that we have done. As some of you might have driven the project, would have noticed that we're basically done. The facility is working as it was designed and scoped for, so we're basically done. There's minor things going on the side of the road and also underneath the bridges on the local roads, but we're primarily done. So this is at the east end. This is we have an HOV going in the eastbound direction, and the picture on the left is the status a few months ago when I came to this board and provided an update. And here on the right, we have already completed that work. And as is shown here, this HOV lane connects to what was the existing HOV lane. So that work is done and the public's using that facility. Over at the Peralta Road, this is an image again on the left of what the project looked like last time I presented to this board. I don't know if you guys remember, or the board member remember, that there was an issue here where contractor couldn't proceed with the work because there was some damage done to the structure. Well, since then they have sped up, and now we have this facility here, and you can see again the HOV lane and also the third line going in the westbound direction. Over at Solano Way, same thing. You can see how it looked in the past and how it looks now with the bridge widening and the road widening as well. Walnut Creek is similar. You had the old structures, and now we have the new structures with the facility working as it was designed. And here is the interchange. We have made improvements on the outside. We're also widening in the median. One thing to note here, commissioners, is that there is still this short weaving action with people coming onto the freeway heading in this direction and people coming off the freeway, and that's in both eastbound and westbound, and that continues to be a problem. We get a lot of questions from the public. In fact, I got one today where they're asking when are we going to improve that, because that's the major flaw in this intersection. And as I came a few months ago as well, we're currently working on several phases to bring some of that relief to the public in a couple of projects. But, the situation is that, funding is an issue, but we are working on that, and that continues to be a concern. And that is also true over at Pacheco Boulevard. We have the similar situation. There's a short weaving action here, people coming off of the freeway and getting on, and that's in both directions as well. So again, it continues to create a lot of concerns for the public. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we have encountered. One of the driving factors as to why this project has gone the way it has gone, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that a little later, is that it's 3.5 miles long, and we have 4 distinct interfaces with existing facilities. We have the outside shoulders in both directions and the inside shoulders in both directions. So at any one of those locations, there might be an existing structure, facility, or different site condition that doesn't allow us to progress with the work the way we would have liked to have done. So here's a couple of examples where we have what we call different site conditions, where we show up, and what is shown on the plans is not really what is happening in the field. On the left side, we have an existing drainage system. In order for us to deal with that drainage system, we had to do some redesign, but one of the driving factors for the cost of that particular change order is the fact that all that work needed to be done at night. So any activity related to get this work going, we had to pay the initial cost of lane closures. An example on the right, we have that condition where we're supposed to match the existing ground, but as you can see in that photo, there's a lot of debris that is underneath the road and adjacent to the road that has to be dealt with before we can continue with the work. So just getting this breaker in there, start breaking it, and also shipping it brings additional costs. So just different site conditions alone is over $1 million that we have spent. There's also a lot of electrical issues. We do have to install metal beam guardrails, concrete barrier rails. We have to install new drainage systems, and we have to install the electrical systems. And they're all on the side of the road. And we plan the work, we show up, and then there's a lot of conflicts. So over here on this picture on the left, there's a lot of an electrical system in here that was not shown. We have to deal with. One of the things that we have to do when we encounter electrical systems that we don't account for in the plans is that we have to go through the effort of investigating what that is doing, what's lights or what signals or what traffic loops is actually being powered from that location. So it's not just a matter of just going in there and say, okay, there's a box here, let's get rid of it. It requires a lot of effort to find out, to get to the bottom of what are we going to do with that box. A lot of times they're abandoned, so we can just get rid of them, but a lot of times they're not. So that means that we have to create some bypass situation while we install the permanent work. Here, this picture over here, we have a drainage pipe that's supposed to go underneath here, underneath this metal beam guardrail. However, there is this electrical box, there's the foundation for this lighting and the foundation for this cabinet that is in the way. That's another instance where we actually had to do pre-work before we actually got to the work, and all those things require a lot of work for some of the reasons I stated before, and also we have to find a way to power this luminaire, maybe put a temporary lighting at that location. And this is a situation that is similar, where we have this luminaire in the way of future work. And so we have encountered a lot of those situations. We continue to have those situations in the field, and we have spent north of $675,000 on those type of issues. We also have a lot of vandalism occurring in the project. There is a lot of theft, primarily copper wires for the electrical systems, and these can be newly installed systems. Just between APC and now, we had just installed a new system in the EGAT that's vandalized and the copper wire stolen. So this is an ongoing issue. We're trying to work with Caltrans to see how quickly they can take this off of our hands, because then it becomes their issue. But until that point, to that day comes, it's our responsibility. And, it's an ongoing issue. I don't think it's isolated to our project. It happens throughout the Bay Area and maybe beyond. And, in this situation, we have to, if these stolen wires are powering the lighting of the freeway, or again, or traffic loops, or maybe signals as you're coming off the freeway, the off ramps, then they have to immediately be fixed. So again, this takes away resources from continue with the work as we have planned. That alone is about $338,000 that we have spent remediating all those issues. We have spent about $650,000 on just maintaining the freeway. There's a lot of situations like this pictures. It's a continuing issue. Again, it's 3.5 miles. The project's 2 years long. A lot of accidents for any reason that we can think of, they happen. And it also, not only do they hit crash cushions, they also hit metal beam guardrails, newly installed metal beam guardrails. They hit luminaires, they hit signs. So there's a coming off of the road and hitting drainage systems. It really is amazing the things that happen on the freeway. So, but we are responsible to keep the freeway in a condition that is safe to travel. So, we come in the morning, we encounter the situation, we have to fix it before we go to work. Or what happens sometimes, it happens on the weekend, it happens at night. We have to mobilize the crews and get them fixed as quickly as possible. And another thing that continues to plague this project is buried man-made objects. These are situations where it's concrete or other man-made objects that are left behind, and they have to be mitigated and taken care of before the work proceeds. So here on the left, the section that we were supposed to encounter was just a few inches. As you can see here, is over 15 inches. That's additional work and also additional transportation costs. Picture in the middle, there's a big concrete, box, something there that we had to just get rid of. Again, that delays the project. And these foundations over here. So there's several things that we have encountered throughout the project, again, that we have to, they're unanticipated and we have to deal with. This is an issue that I brought up before, and it has to do with the fact that the design missed the transitions between different type of surfaces on the road. And I want to point out that, a lot of things that are attributed to the design, and there's a few of them. It's important to note that even though we're fixing that during construction, that's a project cost. So what I mean by that is that had we identified this issue during the design phase, we still would have had to pay for this work. Obviously, it would have been under more favorable conditions because it's under a bidding environment, a competitive environment. Whereas it's more expensive in construction because that is no longer the case. but nonetheless, it's a real project cost. And I want to make sure that that's understood by the board members, because we have spent a lot of money, but a lot of those things we would have spent that money anyways, to a large degree. And I have also brought up this issue in the past, but I think it's worth bringing up again just because of the cost. We're supposed to match up to the existing roadway. That roadway is supposed to be neatly squared. Obviously that kind of unrealistic, because the roadway has been there for many, many years, and it has some rounding to it. So we have to make it flat, round, that square. And in addition to that, we encounter spalls along the way. So it's not just the fact that it's a rounded edge. In addition to that, we have all these conditions where the road is deteriorated, we have spalls, and we have to square those too. And one last example of some of the issues that we have encountered. This is a design issue as well, where we have a bridge like we do at Grayson Creek, where we have a big angle between the creek and the road. Then we cannot have a condition where this here is called an approach slab. It's not actually part of the bridge. And what happens is that our plans call for it to be straight like this, but that is not the way it's supposed to be designed. You're supposed to have these steps like this. And of course, as you can see here, that requires additional effort and additional materials. But we fixed it, we did it right, but nonetheless, it's an additional expansion of the project. Excuse me. And here we have basically a display of how the change orders are categorized. Most of them are different site conditions. The other is primarily design issues, like I mentioned earlier, things that were missed, but we addressed in construction. There's a lot of issues that get brought up to us by Caltrans or the district or the Corps of Engineers or many other stakeholders that they want things to be done a certain way. It's beyond the scope. We have to do it. We spend a lot of money doing that. Supplemental is primarily materials and equipment that we provide the contractor, California Highway Patrol. Maintenance, we talked about that, all the issues that we have to address. We also have spent some money trying to catch up in certain areas, because we have fallen behind, and there's also a small amount of money for permits. And before I conclude my presentation, I want to bring up an issue that's out there. The contractor feels at this point that they have not been compensated enough for the issues they have had to deal with, and they have submitted a package. I took this graphic out of that submittal. And basically what they're saying here is that there's a significant amount of issues all over the project. So this is 680 here, and they just found out the location of each issue, where they have a request for information, letters that they have put out to us about issues, and there's also a number of change orders. And basically what they're saying is that this is too much, and therefore, we owe them more money to get them out of our project. And staff has been talking to the contractor, trying to understand their costs. I think it's fair to say that we don't agree with a lot of situations. And the executive director is leading the discussions with the contractor, and we'll see where this takes us. But it's a significant amount of money that they want. Just wanted to bring it up to the board. So with that, I am open to any questions. I took that down. Can you see everybody now? Okay.
Yeah, as soon as I go back to my different view. Thank you very much, Ivan. And do any board members have questions, or commissioners? I see Commissioner Mitchoff's hand raised, and then followed by Commissioner Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ivan, thank you. Excellent. I drive that almost every day, and I sympathize with you with the calls you get from the public, but it's so much better than it was. We're never satisfied and what have you. But I see that our next item You mentioned that Tim has been negotiating is $2,073,000. I was just curious, maybe it should wait till the next one, but I'm wondering what their original ask was. I can appreciate that there's been all this, things that we didn't know would be there kind of stuff. And I think whatever we've paid is worth every penny. Just coming, and I did it today. I was coming eastbound from Martinez on Highway 4, and just the addition of opening that lane instead of having to merge back into 2, it's been wonderful. So I'm just curious. That's my question. And if you think it's more appropriate for the next discussion item, I'm happy to wait.
Well, I can answer it right now, Commissioner. Thank you for the question. So yeah. So what we're asking for in the next item is just the amount of money to get us through what I call the physical work, getting everything done and in shape in order for Caltrans to accept it. The last slide that I showed, which are all the issues that the contract has brought up, that's in addition to the $2 million that we're going to ask for.
Okay, I'll let Tim then talk about that. So the $2,073,000 is just to get us to where we need to be for what we feel needs to be done before we, I guess, turn it over to Caltrans. Thank you, Ivan. And I just want to thank you. Other than the fact that you look that you're coming to us from a cave and everything, it highlights you. But thank you for all your work and that of your team and everyone. It's such an improvement. People will never, as I said, be happy, but I really appreciate all the work you've put into it. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. And now Commissioner Hudson.
I think Karen touched on most of what I was going to ask, Ivan. I want to be clear that this additional 2 million plus, it does finish the project to the point where you can deliver. You don't, I mean, this isn't a big delay thing. Also, it's keep everything on track and 2 million more and it's done. Now you have to do this additional negotiation. Do you think this is going to be in the 2 million range also, or what are we talking about here? 200 million? I mean, my point is I hate to do one thing where you give and then you get asked to give again. And whoa, where did you come up with that figure? Do you have any idea how much more this thing is going to cost to finish it? I think is where I'm going with this.
Yes, that's a very good question, Commissioner. So yeah, so the 2 million plus is what we think is going to get us to where we need to be to, finish the project. So the answer to the other one is the other question that you have is more complicated. But I will say this, that had staff felt that what the contractor was asking was fair, then we would have come to you and ask for that money. We would have found a way to, understand where those costs are. As of right now, as we speak, we don't really have an understanding with the contractor, but that doesn't mean there's no merit there. It's just that they haven't been able to provide us with enough. And a lot of those things, I'm going to let Tim talk about this, but a lot of the things are there is some additional costs and, perhaps taking this all the way through the court system. If we, so it's going to have, at some point, there might need to be a business decision to be had.
Ivan?
I think that we're not there yet, but I will let Tim speak to that effect. And I think that's the best way I can answer, Commissioner.
And Ivan, our counsel David McCrae, you want to say something?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ivan, I was just going to say that I think the best answer is that staff is still reviewing and will come back to the board at the proper time.
That gives me the idea I was looking for.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Commissioners, just following up with Ivan and David's comments here. The contractor has submitted a request for payment, and Ivan is doing a great job working with his team, evaluating the merits of this request, and we are in conversations with the contractor to really determine what has merit and what additional information might be needed for us to do our review. But we will bring back, as we learn about more information, we will bring this back to the authority board sometime next year in 2022 after staff feels like we have something to bring back to the board.
Okay, thank you. And
just one more comment, Commissioner. I just wanted to make sure that if we put this out there today, just so the board knows what's all that's out there. But yeah, we're not quite ready to come and provide details and with a recommendation of any sort. So I just wanted to finish answering by saying this.
Okay, thank you, Ivan. So next we have Commissioner White, and then she lowered her hand. So we have Commissioner White.
Thank you, Chair Geringer. Just wanted to thank you, Ivan, for the very thorough presentation. And although we do have challenges ahead of us, I do look forward to learning more. And on behalf of Transplant and all of our East County communities, I just wanted to thank my colleagues for investing in this project. I think it has made a tremendous impact on how we move throughout the area. And I, like Supervisor Mitchoff, I really appreciate the additional capacity there. Many of us travel that way to go to and from work. And so just wanted to thank everyone for their hard work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner White. And I don't drive through it as much as some of you, but definitely have it's been a much more pleasant experience going through there, not quite as sort of white knuckle as through the construction phase. And so I also extend my thanks to you, Ivan, and your team for that. And I know there are lots involved, but you and your team for all the work that you're doing on that. Are there any other questions from commissioners or comments? I don't see any hands raised, so we'll go to the public. Terry Ann, have we received any written comment on this item?
No written public comment.
And then are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Please raise your hand. And
I don't see any hands raised.
thank you, Terry Ann. So thank you, Ivan. This was an information item. And so we will move on to item number 2 on this particular item related to this project. And it is an action item, and it will be presented again by Ivan Ramirez, and to consider increasing the construction allotment for the contract with Brossamer and Wall. So Ivan, take it away again.
I'm sorry, I muted myself. So I was trying to share my screen.
I'm
here.
sure. Okay. Your screen was up. We did not hear you asking if it was up.
Yeah,
there you
sorry.
go.
Where is my presentation now? I always struggle with this thing, so I apologize.
So we can't
Your
see it. It looks
presentation's
like,
up.
yeah, your presentation is up. It looks like it might be a couple of slides in from the
Okay,
beginning.
um,
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, can you see the project status spreadsheet?
Yes.
The project budget status. Yes. we
Yeah,
can see
sorry.
that.
So I apologize again. I always struggle with this situation. So here, Commissioner, this is an action item, and we're asking the board to approve Resolution 1859P Revision 1, whereby we're going to increase the construction allotment by $2,773,000. And what that is going to do is bring us to what I was indicating earlier. We think that we're going to spend all that money to get us through the end of the project. And by the time we're done, we're estimating that we're going to finish at $99,739,811. So with that, I am open to any questions regarding this. So the request is approval of resolution 1859P revision 1, which will increase the authorized construction allotment by $2,073,000 for a new total construction allotment value of $99,775,223.
Okay, and then the second part, can we do the motion for both items?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And in addition to that, staff seeks approval of resolution 2147P, which will adopt amendment number 2 to the 2019 Measure J strategic plan. And what we have there is the reserve, the $2,073,000 is the reconstruction reserve that the board has set aside for conditions like this one, where a lot of the risk end up manifesting themselves in the construction. And that will allow us to bring the money to the construction allotment.
Okay, thank you. Will you stop sharing, take down the presentation? And while we're doing that, do any commissioners have comments
I'll
or
move staff
questions?
recommendation to get it started.
Okay, and then Terry Ann, are there any written comments?
No written public comments.
And any members of the public who would like to speak to this item, please raise your hand now. And no, we don't see anyone. So we have a motion from Commissioner Hudson and a second from Commissioner Nowak. Terry Ann, please conduct the roll call vote.
Okay, Commissioner Butt,
Yes.
Commissioner Glover, Commissioner Glover,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Haskew,
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak,
Yes.
Commissioner Thorpe,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Chair Geringer.
Aye,
Okay, motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Arnerich absent.
thank you. And thank you, Ivan, for the very good presentation and all of the work. So we'll now move forward to the next item.
Teresa, could I ask a question before we leave? The
No,
thing
your
that I didn't.
opportunity. Yes, please. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I'm sorry. The thing that wasn't clear to me actually is trying to get an idea of what they're asking for. I almost wish that if in negotiating or discussing or whatever it is, hopefully that isn't taking a lot away from the time needed to get this done. I think time's becoming more important than the price that's on it. That you have, well, the last time I did, we had like an administrative committee. If Tim and Ivan or whomever could bounce it off of your administrative committee to get an idea, if it's that tight, I'd really like to see it go rather than wait a month, if you know what I mean. I really don't want to lose a lot of time because of rain and discussion and put off and whatever it is. This was the number 1 or number 2 priority we had during Measure C.
Okay, thank
May I
you.
provide a quick answer? So Commissioner, so the field work is almost done, like I stated earlier. That's why the freeway, it's in almost its final condition. So as far as the delay, that's not a concern too much other than what has already happened behind us. So we're almost done.
I just want to bring the point out if I can, and I'll get off my soapbox, Teresa. I used to run marathons. I was almost done at the 25-mile mark, Ivan. I would just recommend that it's a lot better when you get to 26 1/4. Until it's done, there's always that concern.
Message received. Thank you. Okay, so we will move on to the next item, and which is an informational presentation, which will be introduced by Stephanie Hu on the East Contra Costa County Dynamic Personal Microtransit Feasibility Study, or the Dpmt study. And so Stephanie, welcome.
Thanks, Chair Geringer and Commissioners. Well, good evening. Like Chair mentioned, this is an informational item, and it will be presented by Habib Shamsky from AMG. Habib will provide a presentation on the Dpmt, the East County Dpmt study that they completed earlier this year for the local jurisdictions in East County. I wanted to add that we actually have 2 items this evening about transit in East County. This current one is about Dpmt, which is a first mile, last mile solution. And Matt Kelly will be presenting and discussing the extension of high capacity regional transit through their work on the East County Integrated Transit Study in the next agenda item. So I just wanted to note that. And with that, I'll hand it off to Habib for the presentation on DPMT.
Good afternoon, Chair Geringer, Commissioner.
Am I the only one hearing an echo?
There's an echo.
No. We got to do something about it. Echo.
Well, Christina, turn your mic off. Mute. Does it work now?
Yes.
Okay. I think that Christina had her mic on. Yeah. Again, good afternoon. My name is Habib Shamsko. I'm happy to present the outcome of this East County Dynamic Personal Microtransit Feasibility Study that conducted earlier this year and finished by April. So I'm going to go through a brief presentation about the outcome of this study. Next slide. So for those of you that haven't got a chance to go to the Momentum station and see it for yourself, I have a short video to show you that how does this look like. It is a small pod that 4 people can sit in there and 2 people very comfortably. So the door open at the middle. Even if you are 7 foot high person can sit down and the door close and it will take off. That's why we call it personal micro transit. And this is the boarding zone, very inexpensive, can be built currently at the Momentum station. We are in the process of building the second half of this to make it a complete loop. That's why we have stopped all the visit to the unit. And hopefully the rest of you that haven't seen the unit, you will be able to see it late January or early February. So next slide is some of the rendering of how does this look like and interact with everything else in the environment. So what is a dynamic personal microtransit, DPMT? That's what you're going to hear about this for a number of the years to come. Is a closed system, autonomous electric public microtransit solution. Is virtual rail, tires on pathway, private seating on demand. Is extremely safe and with the non-stop rides. And it is also is financially sustainable model. Next slide is that the advantage shows the advantage of the DPMT is economic development. Sustainability is the most important feature of this. Support emission reduction goals of the CCTA. Is transit accessibility for community of concern, is a first mile, last mile connection and solution. It complements fixed route transit. It doesn't replace that. It is cost effective. It requires very smaller footprints, about the 7 to 9 feet of the width. It's safe and personalized, and it is can be used on demand. A few points about the personal safety. Safety is personalized, safe on-demand travel. It has built-in multi-layered protection and security, including security barriers, sensors, SOS button, cameras, instant emergency response, and vehicle that stop and react all in concert. Some of the system safety features include real-time monitoring inside and outside of the network and equipped with the intrusion alarm system. It operates in safe right-of-way. Closed corridor means it never mixes people and vehicles. It has it's a built-in multi-layer of the protection and security into the system as well. I have to note that there are other Dpmt system in progress in the Bay Area and in California, and that include the one in Mountain View area near Google campus. It is one under consideration in South San Francisco, and there is one is in progress at the San Jose airport as well. So this feasibility study conducted by five public partners in East Contra Costa County, include the city of the Oakley, Brentwood, Pittsburgh, and Antioch, as well as the Contra Costa County. And throughout the process, both Tri-Delta Transit as well as Ccta, they have been involved in development of the feasibility study as well. No major J money has been used to conduct this feasibility study. So the three simple goals of the project that early on all the stakeholders agree on is number one was to provide the transit accessibility by building the Dpmt system to provide first mile, last mile connection in East Contra Costa County. It provides accessibility to assure economic development and attract employers. The project is as much as the economic development project is also a transportation project too. It evaluates feasibility to attract potential public funding and the private financing, while opportunity is there with the private sector. So this is the network conceptual routing plan for the network that we work with the city's staff in order to accomplish this. By no means this is the final network. This is at the conceptual level, at the sketch level planning to come up with a network that we can size the project and continue with our feasibility study. As you can see, the network is well aligned with the major transportation asset and services within the corridor. It connects to all the BART station. It includes 53 boarding zone and parallel to the SR4 in East Contra Costa County. Dpmt complement existing transit, as I said before, and other active transportation modes in East Contra Costa County. So in order to know that whether we do have a project or not that justify the further feasibility study, we needed to do a ridership demand analysis. And we used the census-based LEHD to estimate potential trips within walking distance of the proposed boarding zone, added existing mode share and existing ridership trends, and used logit model to estimate mode shift from the drive alone and carpool to proposed boarding zone. Added annual growth plus planned project to estimate 2030 ridership. In final analysis, we came up with 13 million potential demand, but in order to be extremely conservative, we cut it almost to half with the 7 million annual ridership estimate for the demand for the Dpmt. Just to put it in the perspective, the next slide, the Tri-Delta Transit carry 2.7 million passengers per year. This is pre-COVID number. And the eBART annual ridership is 2.2 million. And the annual traffic for the SR4 is 52 million. You can see how this 7 million can have a major impact on SR4 corridor congestion and the traffic. As far as emission commission, this slide, it shows that the microtransit in comparison with the LRT or buses, as well as the passenger car, 1x versus 6x and 15x. So Dpmt, it is provide for a complete trip without using your personal car. That means that they're taking the unit to the commuter rail, and from the commuter rail back to your destination, as well as biking to the Dpmt boarding zone and using fixed route transit, or walking to the station and using Dpmt for the first mile, last mile connection to the commuter rail as well. Some of the clear benefits of the Dpmt include support economic development and create jobs by increasing mobility and connectivity. It is a congestion relief project with development of the first microtransit network, which result in reduction in the VMT on SR4. It increased access for underserved community. And as I said, it is transit accessibility project for the first mile, last mile connectivity, among other mobility options that Ccta considering in Contra Costa County. A few words about the financial plan. In order to complete our feasibility study, we have done that again at the sketch level planning. Dpmt cost for the entire network, the range of the cost is between $450 million to $500 million for the three major segments that I showed that earlier, the Pittsburgh segment, Antioch, Oakley, and Brentwood segment. So in order to take advantage of the P3 environment and the private sector contribution, we are exploring private sector participation with the private funding to finance the project, refinement of the cost estimate, and development of the phasing plan. We are also same time evaluating grant funding opportunity for the project from many different sources of the grant that is expected to come in 2022 and beyond. And we are seeking input from the stakeholder, and we continue with the proof of concept and testing at the Momentum station in order to move to the public demonstration project. Again, these are some of the pictures that I have shown that earlier, and the next step on the project is that we are working to get additional industry outreach and input, a refined funding plan and segmentation of the project. We are expanding the proof of concept at the Momentum station. We started the construction of the phase 2 a couple of weeks ago and expected to finish in about 2 months. We are investigating the delivery option and P3 authority, and I am sure in next several months you are going to hear from the executive director on this subject as we are progressing along. With that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Habib. And I see hands up already. So hold on one. Vice Chair Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Habib. This is very, very intriguing. In terms of real-time use, I have a couple of questions. This Glideways goes along its old track, is that correct? Its own corridor.
Yes, and
okay.
Yeah.
And does it cross streets, like public streets, or no?
It does cross. You have to have an overpass in order to cross the public street. Yeah.
So it wouldn't come in contact. And would pedestrians be allowed to be walking along the corridor, or it has to be totally separate?
Not at all. It is fenced off in either side, and there are pedestrians are going to be able to cross either underneath or over when you interact with the BART station, for example.
And so what do we see as the most appealing use for this? To get people from the BART station along its own track to different parts of the neighborhood or to a parking lot? What are we thinking here?
Well, in Contra Costa County, 5.5% of the people only use that transit. Nationwide number is about 7%. And we are trying to improve accessibility to transit, that the people either they have to drive or they have to walk a long distance in order to get to fixed route transit or BART station. We are trying to improve the transit accessibility and address the issue of the first mile and last mile.
So it could go through a neighborhood, you know, for a few miles. I could hop on, and instead of walking or biking or getting in my own car, I could take this and then I could get to the BART station. Is that like a possible use?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. This is very intriguing.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you. And Commissioner Hudson?
There we go. Get unmuted. Well, Habib, I don't have to tell you how excited I am about this. I mean, personally, I'll give you another 4 hours before you can put this thing into operation in Brentwood so I can see what it looks like. But I really think that's the key. How fast can you get this out there to generate something? I mean, I feel like I'm back in the days when we were trying to decide between 8 tracks and cassettes. I mean, it's a matter of who gets one out there and works. I can tell you right now, and I've told you before, that in my city, if we had this thing tied to the operation of that bridge that we're going to build over Bollinger, it's ideal. You're talking about thousands of homes connecting millions of square feet of commercial. And we probably could do dedicated. In fact, half that bridge is supposed to be a dedicated lane. But I can't tell you any stronger than the faster you can get that thing up in operation, people see it, they'll want it. And that's really the key. We heard it when we did the presentations and the press releases. Is it available to people? Well, you know, the public. People get on this thing, they want it. And I've been on 4 or 5 since the last time I was on Easy 10, and they're getting much better. So I guess the key question will be, has anybody thought about the scalability, that if you have this dedicated track, if the next one comes along that's bigger, does it work there? You know, do you connect 5 of these things where they're 4 inches away from each other? I mean, you don't have to connect them, but they all go together. Are we that far along in the progress that, I mean, you could see 10 of these things, like 10 BART trains going up over the pass to where they all want to go to the same place? Or is we just content right now to get one going?
Very, very good comments and question, commissioners. This is highly scalable. The key advantage is that can be built within 5 years versus the BART extension is 15 to 25 years. The second advantage is that the cost is the 1/5 of the cost of anything that is massive in construction cost and everything else. And you can build as many boarding zones as you wanted. 53 is planned for the East Contra Costa County.
Thank you. And any other questions or comments from authority board members? I see Commissioner Haskew, and then I see Representative Allen.
What is the distance? Did I interrupt you?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no. What is the distance that one of these pods can take people? And I thought I heard somebody, you say that it could go on regular streets and then join the trail. Sorry.
So the distance, theoretically, it could go from East Contra Costa County all the way to the SFO airport. If number of these loops has been built that they can interconnect with each other from community to another community, there is no limit on the distance. But for time being, where it is for the short distance of addressing the first mile, last mile, and connectivity to BART station and connectivity to fixed route transit and the business center in order to attract more people to using the transit.
But the individual pod, does it have to get recharged every trip, or how far can it go on its power?
It will recharge after the 24 hours use, and it just keep improving on the recharging as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Representative Allen, and then Commissioner Glover.
Thank you, Chair Geringer. Thank you, MB, for the presentation. I'm excited, and I think everyone's kind of said everything that I would say, so I'll leave it there that I'm excited for this. I love new innovation, and I can't wait to actually tour Gomentum because I missed out on the last round. So Tim knows that I am #1 on the list next, right?
No, number 2.
I was going to say, I don't see a lot of elbows being thrown yet, but you are on the list.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Glover.
Thank you. And Bob, thank you for the presentation tonight. I think that this is starting to excite all of us because of the opportunity. As we know, we're totally gridlocked in the East County region. And so this is really going to be a game changer in terms of the interconnectivity that we would have with other transit systems. So I just want to say I'm excited, and I know that there's a big mountain to climb, but certainly we're going to put all the energy we can towards making this a reality really soon. And again, thank you for the presentation tonight.
So lots of excitement. Any other commissioners or representatives who want to speak? Terry Ann, did we receive any written public comment on this item?
No written public comments been received.
And any members of the public who want to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And I don't see anyone. Do you, Terry Ann?
No hands raised.
No.
Yeah,
So,
I forgot to say that we received the resolution of the support for all 4 cities council as well as the Tri-Delta Transit on this.
That is great news as well. And I will echo the excitement. And what I heard was that we're even going to be able to get more visits going a little bit earlier in 2022 than what we had thought might be happening. So that February rather than March. And so we'll keep pushing for that and get Deborah and others out to see the project. So, and it'll be a bigger loop. So, okay, well, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is an action item from the Planning Committee on the East County Integrated Transit Study, locally preferred alternative, and it will be presented by Matt Kelly, and it is agenda item 9A.
Thank you, Chair Geringer. Are you seeing my?
I am, and that would mean others are as well. Thanks.
Are you seeing the full presentation or the
we're seeing your presentation notes though.
Gotcha. That's what I will swap here. Hopefully that's better.
There we go.
All right. Thank you again, Chair Geringer and committee members. Matt Kelly, Senior Transportation Planner with Ccta. It's great to be here tonight. I'm here with my consultants from Nelson Nygaard, Jimmy Mitchell, and Thaddeus Wozniak. I'll have them be presenting in just a minute. I wanted to kick off this presentation and just let you know that we have been coordinating with the folks you just saw, AMG and the Dpmt, as its name highlights. It is microtransit. Our project here is what we call mass transit, so moving more people to between 2 points, as opposed to the microtransit, which is moving people from those focused points to more dispersed areas, those first and last mile connections. So we think these two projects complement each other and could both add to each other's ridership if both were implemented. But I'll get into my presentation and get into why we're here. So as you know, Measure C and Measure J have really focused in East County on extending that mass transit as far east as we can go. In 2018, we opened or BART opened the extension to Antioch, and it was immediately met with demand that exceeded capacity, especially at the parking facility. And so that parking lot was immediately oversubscribed. We started thinking about ideas for improving that situation, getting more riders on. So Ccta staff at that time applied for a grant from Caltrans's Sustainable Communities Transportation Planning Grants in order to study a transit extension beyond the Antioch BART station, and that would look at a number of modes. So we applied for that. In the meantime, Ccta and BART started working together on a parking solution at Antioch in the meantime, and we were able to get that funded, and I think it just opened a couple of weeks ago. So that added 800 parking spaces there. But we know that demand, especially when as the pandemic ends, that demand is going to be back. And also in order to demonstrate the need for extending this high capacity transit service beyond Antioch is this slide I've got up here that shows you how Antioch riders were able to benefit in travel time on the BART extension versus driving. So if you were to go from Antioch station to Walnut Creek station, Hillcrest to downtown Walnut Creek, you're saving 14 minutes by riding transit. Same with going from Antioch to downtown Oakland. You're saving about the same amount of time versus driving a car. When you look at what's going on, if you're leaving from around the Brentwood station area, which is midway between Sand Creek Road and Lone Tree Way at Highway 4, where the McCollum overcrossing is about to be constructed and where Brentwood's Innovation Center is currently being planned. So between that location and downtown Walnut Creek, a driver is saving 3 minutes over transit because of the amount of time it takes you to get into the BART system. And going into Oakland, a driver still saves 4 minutes. That's on a 90-minute transit time. So there are definitely, we'd like to see some of those same improvements we saw at Antioch extended out to Brentwood. So subsequent to service starting and applying for the grant, Ccta was awarded about $800,000 to study this extension of transit service to Brentwood. So we went out for an RFP in early 2020, retained Nelson Nygaard as a consultant. Their consultant team has Mark Thomas and Farron Pierce, who also worked on the BART extension and the Highway 4 widening. So we had a team that was very knowledgeable about the corridor up there and as we preserved the median for transit. The first thing we did was put together a stakeholder committee that included the cities of Antioch, Oakley, Brentwood, the Tri-Delta Transit Agency, BART, the Supervisor Burgess's office, and Caltrans in order to guide the process. And so that they were kind of we had a steering committee and a technical advisory committee to really guide how this project went. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Jimmy Mitchell from Nelson Nygaard. He's going to walk us through the criteria we looked at, how we developed the modal alternatives, and how we really got to evaluating these alternatives. So Jimmy, you want to go ahead and take over?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Matt. As you said, my name is Jimmy Mitchell. Nelson Nygaard. I was Deputy Project Manager for the ECITS study, primarily helping usher us through the workflow that we're looking at here. As we began this process in early 2020, we established in our discovery phase really an understanding of the existing conditions, travel markets, travel flows, existing delay patterns, congestion patterns, things like that along the SR4 corridor. After identifying some of the constraints and opportunities within the corridor itself, within the right-of-way, we used that in phase 2 to develop details, which is essentially when we started putting together potential alternative solutions. Within each of these phases, you see we do have multiple rounds of public engagement and feedback. So within each phase, before we move to the next phase, we had a pretty robust public engagement period where we had surveys, online open houses. We weren't able to do any in-person engagement, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, but we did as best as we could to try to engage with local stakeholders through their own mediums, their own contact lists, and other associations and adjacent projects to try to get the word out digitally for people to be able to understand what this project was about, how we were developing solutions, how we would evaluate them, and then eventually what the recommendations would be. As we look at, again, sorry with that tangent, but into as we got through the second phase, when we were defining what these alternatives might look like, we were also defining potential ways of measuring the potential benefits and trade-offs and impacts of each of these alternatives. And so those were vetted with members of the community at round 2 to really get a sense on what was important to them in terms of the types of metrics and thresholds that we might use to evaluate performance or gauge which alternatives were preferred to others, as well as getting a general sense of what they'd like to see out of the alternatives in terms of performance and mode and things of that nature, amenities and like that. Phase 3, when it comes to decision making, was the very detailed and rigorous evaluation of those alternatives. I'll walk through exactly what the alternatives were in the next couple slides. Phase 3 was the actual, again, rigorous, detailed evaluation of those alternatives, where we had 14 different criterion based on some of the feedback we received from members of the public and community about what was important to them. Also some very traditional metrics and measurements in terms of comparative costs, travel times, ridership, other sort of user benefits, environmental benefits, and things of that nature. At the conclusion of round 3, which just ended from an engagement perspective, ended in early November, I believe. We were really reporting out on the results of the findings of the evaluation. So what were the final scores, metric rankings and ratings, which ones performed better or worse, and which different goals and criteria that were identified. So we wanted to really be as transparent as possible to let people know, there were alternatives that may have performed well in certain areas. They may have not performed as well in other areas, as we tried to really look at, again, which criterion and decision-making factors were most important in terms of selecting an alternative to move forward. We did try to weight those in an appropriate fashion that would really represent the values of the community members that we engaged in East County. So we're with you today to sort of really look at the recommendations to begin phase 4 of the process, which is design and delivery. Within our scope of work, we have a task that allows us to really expand in what we call in conceptual design of a locally preferred alternative, which means essentially advancing these concepts that we were developing through the alternatives analysis process to get a little bit more sharpening of the pencils, understanding some of the more detailed constraints, some of the more getting into some of the weeds, so to speak, about what might be really important decisions that come up during the design phase, some of the critical factors from a constructability perspective, drilling down on a little bit more of the cost, understanding a little bit more about operations and circulation near stations. So the goal tonight is to really give you a better picture of the entire process, how we've gotten to the recommended locally preferred alternatives, make sure that you all feel comfortable with how we've gotten there, what we are recommending moving forward, and hopefully get consensus on moving forward with an LPA that we can take into conceptual design over the next couple of months. This project is scheduled to terminate at the end of February. So I think that's when the grant expires, and we are hopeful in getting ourselves set up right now internally to be able to hit the ground running with that conceptual design process to refine those other aspects of cost, constructability, and implementation. Next slide. Thank you. We're going to go through a few slides here, which is basically a bit of a walkthrough of each of those three phases about what went into those three phases and what the objectives of them were. So I'll try to go through these a little bit more quickly since we've sort of walked through the overall roadmap. Phase one, again, was that discovery phase, where we're just really trying to get a better sense of the lay of the land, the environment, the travel markets, infrastructure out in East County, and really taking the needs from a mobility perspective and how they related to high capacity transit service and access to develop what we called our project need statement. The project need statement is very much an important part of the overall framework for alternatives analyses, because that need statement really sets the tone to give yourself essentially boundaries and guidelines in terms of, well, if we want to address these needs within the scope of this project, what should our project aim to do from a goals perspective, for example? And so the goals of the overall project very often relate directly to the needs and create that overall foundation that we use as a framework for the alternatives development and evaluation process. So as we go into phase two, again, talking about how we actually refine those objectives and outcomes. The goal in phase two is really to get to a point where we had a reasonable set of alternatives that we could say represented a good set of the feasible and reasonable options from a transportation and mass transit perspective in East County. So we really took those needs and goal statements to say what kind of modes and guideways and amenities and other infrastructure, capital investments and service operating profiles would best serve the needs for mobility that we're trying to address here in the SR4 corridor. And that's really from the alternatives development side of things. On the other side is the criterion, and which is how we're going to evaluate them. The framework that we developed was really looking at both qualitative and quantitative criteria to understand, again, some of those more traditional hard-lined areas of evaluation from a cost, time savings and impacts perspective, but also understanding some of the less tangibles in terms of some of the equity goals of the project, accessibility goals of the project, some of those things that we heard from members of the community about what was more valuable to them, and being able to do some relative comparisons of performance between the different alternatives there. So in certain cases, it was a little bit easier and a little bit more clear to try to do things in either a quantitative manner or a qualitative manner, depending on what kind of data was available and exactly how we were looking at comparing the performance of these different alternatives. So at the end of phase two, we went out to the public again to say, okay, are these the right options? Are these the criteria that you think are correct? Before we advanced to phase three, where we really did that detailed evaluation. We had for each of these criteria, again, we had 14 criteria. We had 6 actual goal statements that came out of that needs process. So we had 6 goals, 14 criteria, and actually a total of 6 alternatives that we looked at. So for each of these criteria, those 14, we came up with a detailed methodology of how we would evaluate those criteria and what data sets were needed, how we would analyze and what tools we might use to do the analysis. Then we looked at, essentially, once we did perform the analysis, how we compare the results. And so, if you have a set of numbers X, Y, Z, so to speak, well, how would we rate the relative benefits of alternative 1, who might have received an X, versus alternative 2, who might have rated at a Y? Is that a relatively small gap in terms of performance? Is it a sizable gap in performance? What's the relative benefits or potential impacts that we're seeing as a result of these analyses? At the end of round 3, we came up with a recommended alternative, which we've gone through a vetting process with both our steering and technical advisory committees. We've had conversations in depth with Transplan, which was on the 17th of last month, I believe. We went to Transplan and presented. And we've also gone through vetting of what the recommended alternatives are with the critical transit operators being Tri-Delta Transit and BART to make sure that they're comfortable with where we land and at the end of their evaluation, understanding, again, some of those inputs that they might want us to dig a little bit deeper into also in phase 4 when we get into conceptual design. So again, we're trying to take all that information that we've been collecting over the past year and year and a half and so to really support and justify what we were calling the locally preferred alternative and recommending as a locally preferred alternative today. And so again, I know that's a lot of information. We'll try to go through these also very quickly. These were the 6 goals that I mentioned again before, based on the mobility needs in East County. We looked at improving the overall user experience, responding to the access needs that we heard about from the various communities surrounding the SR4 corridor, meaning Oakley, Antioch, Brentwood, improving air quality and reducing vehicle miles traveled, supporting economic developments, supporting future rail investments to make sure that, you know, whatever we do does not preclude future rail investments or extensions further east in the future as warranted, and making sure we could effectively communicate the benefits of this project to the public and stakeholders. Next slide, please. As we define these alternatives, this is getting a little bit more into the technical side of things. We really built it from the ground up in terms of what the required components are to operate high capacity transit, being a mode, the high capacity vehicle mode, and a dedicated guideway facility or a running way that preserves space for transit to operate either exclusively, semi-exclusively, or potentially operating mixed traffic with benefits for transit priority treatments along the way. In terms of how we assembled the draft alternatives, we looked at combinations of both different types of mode and guideway, primarily meaning looking at the bottom, zero emissions vehicles, which are required through the grant, either a battery electric bus or fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell buses, and multiple types of rail units, being electrified rail being OCS, is what you see in the picture there with the pantograph and wires, or what is called EMU, which uses the same type of vehicle that you currently have operating on BART on the recent extension from Pittsburgh Bay Point. Similar vehicles, just operating under a different sort of power and propulsion, where you essentially have chargeable batteries that would require charging either at the end of line or at your maintenance facility at the beginning and end of service. So those were the zero emission vehicles that we were looking at. We looked at different ways of running those vehicles, again, either in the median of SR4 in a dedicated space, as you see at the top, or in general purpose lanes or HOV lanes, which is what we were calling express bus service, or even as a comparative, just looking at a baseline sort of operations on the arterials, which we called our rapid bus connection. So we tried to look at sort of the multiple levels of capacity and dedicated space that could be provided for transit in East County to be able to get an understanding of the spectrum of how high capacity transit could and would perform given the different types of operating spaces and modes that were out there. As we started really getting into how these alternatives would function, what sort of treatments would be needed and where, we also identified any of these critical infrastructure points and pinch points within the study area, including the SR 160 interchange, grade separations over the Contra Costa Canals and at Laurel, as well as how to connect specifically at the existing Antioch BART station platform, and being able to maneuver inside, outside of the median as needed based on the type of mode and guideway combinations we might have. There were also other site-specific challenges that we addressed throughout the alternatives development phase, but those are a little bit more routine when it comes to constructability based on existing utilities, roadway network, connectivity, and things of that nature, station placements and footprints. As we started sort of stitching these different pieces together from a mode and guideway perspective, we also brought in what the terminal station location and configuration, meaning is the station in the median, is it outside of the median, how would the vehicle have to connect to the station given where the platform was placed, and actually even where the terminal station would be. This is a little bit of a nuance when you look at the western terminus and we talk about why the western terminus may or may not be at Antioch. Primarily, this came up as we started defining where we could put a dedicated running space in the median of SR4. For example, if we had a dedicated median guideway for buses, or I'll start with rail. If we started a dedicated median for rail, it'd be very directly connecting to the existing Antioch station platform. Very little in terms of connectivity at the station platform location directly for the interface and being able to run service continuously through Antioch all the way to Pittsburgh Bay Point to make the transfer to BART there for trips further west. So that would really allow that one seat ride from a rail perspective. from Brentwood to Pittsburgh Bay Point in the median. When we started looking at the BRT and freeway BRT operations in the median, that was a very different situation where we could not have the buses directly dock and do their boarding and alighting at the existing Antioch station in the median. We would have to take the buses out of the median at some point to be able to get them to the north side of SR4 and into the existing bus bays outside of Slatton Ranch Road at the BART station, and have their regular interface and circulation there where the rest of Tri-Delta's fixed routes dock currently. So that became and presented a challenge for us to be able to safely bring vehicles out of the median as close as possible to the station, but still have the vehicles be able to do the weaving that they needed to transition from the inside lanes, meaning the left lane, all the way to the far lane to exit at Hillcrest. We found that to be a very dangerous and difficult operations for the drivers. We didn't think it was safe. And so we ended up looking at potentially bringing the vehicles out of the median further east than, at that approach to the Antioch station. But what happened is that you ran into the 160 interchange. And so it was very difficult and unsafe to try to bring vehicles out of the median within that 160 interchange. And you would have had to bring them out of the median east of the 160 interchange, which essentially canceled all the benefits of getting them in the dedicated space to begin with, because they would be stuck in that congestion. So we ended up looking at, if we had a median running solution for buses, we would actually take that route all the way to the all the way to the Pittsburgh Bay Point station. It would actually skip the Antioch and Pittsburgh Center stations and provide a one-seat ride on bus from Brentwood all the way to the Pittsburgh Bay Point station, where they could then transfer to BART to head further west. So all that to say, we tried to look very detailed at the operational considerations that were aligned with the different sort of capital and improvements that we might have, and understanding whether they were or weren't feasible. Because of that, we ended up with a couple of permutations on that western terminus, where we took a freeway BRT all the way to Pittsburgh Bay Point, as well as an express bus in the general purpose lanes. So we'll see all of the alternatives in just a moment. As you saw, those different lines connecting the different permutations of, western terminus mode and guideway combination, and eastern terminus and configuration. There were, over a dozen different potential options that we ended up with when we started looking at, what could we potentially do. To be able to narrow those down again to that reasonable and feasible set of alternatives that we wanted to define and evaluate in detail, we did a fatal flaw assessment, which looked at constructability, safety and security, compatible operations with other modes, meaning again, transit or multimodal active transportation and auto, jurisdictional and regulatory concerns, whether that was federal, state, or local, Caltrans or the cities, as well as were there any redundancies between some of these options, where one alternative was not very different from the other, but was potentially much less cost effective, in which case we would not move the less cost effective alternative forward, and we would only take the alternative that was more cost effective, but still represented the same level of service and treatments. So using those fatal flaws, we came up with a set of 6 final alternatives. And we also refined the criteria that we were using to evaluate them. These are the 6 alternatives. We had a BART rail extension from Brentwood to Antioch in the median. We had 2 freeway BRT options, which operated in their own dedicated space, also in the median of SR4. The freeway BRT to Antioch went directly to Antioch with a direct connector flyover ramp, essentially, that took it out of the median. It was either a flyover ramp or a tunnel option, essentially, for number 2 to get it out of the median. For option number 3, that was in the median up until essentially just east of the Antioch station, where we would jog the buses out of the median and operate again in the HOV and general purpose lanes all the way to Pittsburgh Bay Point, and they would not try to make that weave to the Antioch station. And then we looked at express bus options, which was operating exclusively in general purpose lanes with mixed traffic, both to Antioch and Pittsburgh Bay Point for comparative purposes in terms of trip distance and performance and costs. And we had the rapid bus alternative, which operated on arterial streets and roadways to Antioch Station from the Brentwood Innovation Center in Brentwood. And that had 2 different potential alignments. We looked at one alignment along Hillcrest, which primarily served Brentwood, and another alignment that would have operated along Slatton Ranch Road, which would have been more accessible to the Brentwood community. Sorry, I meant to say Antioch on the Hillcrest alignment. We did note that Slatton Ranch Road is not complete, and so the additional costs to construct the Slatton Ranch Road, as well as mitigations with the crossings of, I think it was Lone Tree and Laurel and others, were included in the costs there. As we noted before, speaking with Glideways and the DPMT, we did not look at those first last mile connectivity options and modifications, as we assume those will be looked at elsewhere and at subsequent points in this process. These are the evaluation criteria that we use to again compare the relative benefits and impacts of these alternatives. I'm not going to read the descriptions to each of you, but I'll be happy to answer any questions on them later. Travel time savings, the comfort and number of transfers, how was it providing access to the communities in East County, Brentwood, Antioch, and Oakley? What was the relative costs of using the service, depending on your destination and how you were accessing the service? What was the ridership potential, emissions reductions potential? How many people could it carry? And how did it align with existing and adopted regional and local plans? The final 6 criteria, we're looking at the flexibility of service, meaning how well could it operate inside, outside of a dedicated space, inside, outside of SR4, or beyond, or any of the initial termini that we identified. How well did it preserve space for transit operations exclusively, meaning that dedicated right-of-way? Did it or did it not support a future rail extension? How long would it take to implement? How did the community feel about these alternatives? And the relative cost effectiveness of capital and operations, recurring operating cost of the service. And so each of those evaluation metrics were looked at in detail, and we ended up with a very hopefully transparent scoring system and rating system that Thaddeus is going to run through with you all right now to take you through the results and the final recommendations.
Thank you, Jimmy. So when we presented these alternatives to the public during our round 2 open house, there was one thing that was very clear, and that was that there was a large public support for really any type of transit expansion within East County. While rail extension did score the strongest, was strongly supported by over 80% of the respondents, and somewhat supported by 15%. Every one of the alternatives had at least 85% of the public supported, either strongly or somewhat. And each alternative had over half of the public respondents say that they strongly supported that alternative as a high capacity transit option within East County. Next slide, Matt. In our evaluation, we had 2 alternatives that separated themselves and rose to the top. Alternative 1, which is the BART rail extension, and then alternative 4, which was the express bus to Antioch. When we looked at the raw scoring out of 70 points, where each of those 14 criteria that Jimmy mentioned was scored on a 1 to 5 scale, the BART alternative had the highest score at 56 out of 70, with express bus second at 45, and then the other alternatives with scores in the low 40s or the 30s. Once we applied weighting to the criteria based on the relative importance of each criteria from the technical perspective, from the responses that we got from the public, from our TAC and steering committees, that scale expanded up to a maximum score of 100 points. The BART extension was still the top performing alternative, followed by the express bus, but the difference between the two was slightly smaller based on that 100-point scale. When we're determining which alternative was selected to be recommended as the locally preferred alternative, we looked at this numerical evaluation process, but we also considered the near-term implementation opportunities and constraints, as well as the existing policy from both MTC and BART around rail extensions. And we'll get to that in a minute. Next slide, Matt. So this slide is intended to highlight where alternative 1 and alternative 4 differentiated from the other alternatives. Alternative 1, which is the BART extension, scored well in terms of reduced travel time, increased ridership, increased capacity, and a reduction in emissions. It also provided dedicated space for transit within the SR4 median and is compatible with a future potential rail extension. Drawbacks to the BART rail extension alternative include a much longer implementation timeline and higher construction costs. And the rail extension also requires additional stationary densities than what's currently planned in the area. Alternative 4, the express bus to Antioch, scored well by being a low-cost alternative with a shorter implementation timeline. It also provided near-term service flexibility and opportunities to extend service into the future. Drawbacks included lower ridership, lower capacity, and less emissions reductions than the rail alternative. It did not create that dedicated space for transit in the SR4 right-of-way, but also did not preclude that space from being allocated to transit in the future. Next slide. So as it shows here, at the end of our evaluation, we are not recommending the BART rail in the SR4 for near-term implementation, even though it was the highest scoring alternative in our evaluation process. And we are recommending the alternative for express bus alternative for near-term implementation. Thanks, Matt. So both MTC and BART have policies around system expansion. MTC Resolution 3434 applies to any physical transit extension project that would use regional discretionary funds, and it quantifies appropriate minimum levels of development around transit stations along new corridors. For BART extension, the minimum number of housing units within a half mile of the station, according to MTC Resolution 3434, is 3,850 housing units. Next slide. BART also has a system expansion policy, which was released in 1999 and is currently undergoing an update. The existing policy looks both at residential land use as well as employment land use. And then it looks at existing housing units and commercial square footage within a half mile of the station. When we compare these thresholds to the proposed development at the Innovation Center at Brentwood, the proposed housing would receive a low rating based on the residential and a low, medium to medium rating for the employment land use category. Next slide. So existing and planned development within a half mile of the proposed station includes roughly 250 existing residential units, as well as about 2,000 proposed residential units at the Innovation Center at Brentwood. There's 4 million square feet of proposed commercial space at the Innovation Center. However, if you look at the graphic on the right, the blue circle, a portion of that is located outside of the half mile radius from the station. Approximately 1 million square feet of that 4 million, which would put the proposed commercial square footage really close to that threshold of 3.4 million square foot between the medium low and a medium rating on the land use, employment land use side. Next slide. So this slide and the following slide just kind of offers a peek into the data that was used in the evaluation process. As Jimmy mentioned, we had 14 different evaluation criteria that we looked at these alternatives. And this is just kind of some key data that kind of jumps out or, are questions that most people ask. So anticipated ridership for the rail alternative was the highest with 37 riders on a typical weekday. All of the freeway-based bus options were right around 800 riders, ranging from 770 to 800, whereas the arterial bus rapid bus alternative was only 250 riders per day. As anticipated, capital costs for the rail extension were much higher than the bus options, with the express bus alternative having the lowest overall capital costs, as well as the lowest capital costs per rider by a significant margin. There isn't that much of a spread in the total annual operations and maintenance costs between the alternatives, but you can start to see a difference in those costs when you look at the annualized O&M costs on a per rider basis. Next slide, Matt. We also looked at travel times and travel costs from Brentwood to Walnut Creek, Oakland, and San Francisco. All of this went into the evaluation process, but for simplicity, we're only showing the metrics from Brentwood to Walnut Creek in the presentation. All alternatives had a shorter travel times from Brentwood to Walnut Creek than driving. And the travel time benefits of transit became even larger when we compared the travel times to Oakland and San Francisco as well. The anticipated user costs for all of these alternatives was less than driving as well by a significant margin. Next slide, Matt. So what's next? So we're here today looking for approval of alternative 4, the express bus to Antioch as the locally preferred alternative. From here, we'll begin the conceptual design process that Jimmy talked about earlier, where we take a closer look at the express bus alternative, including conceptual design of the transit center at Brentwood, evaluation of transit priority opportunities between the transit centers and SR4, and evaluate potential modifications or need to Tri-Delta Transit's maintenance and storage facilities as a couple of examples. We'll look to also advance concept design of elements of alternative 1, the BART rail extension, to help better understand these key constraints and design elements in preparation of a potential future study into BART rail extension. We'll also refine cost estimates and refine the alternatives in the preparation of a final report before we close out the project at the end of February, which, as Jimmy mentioned, is when the Caltrans grant expires for the study. And with that, back to you, Matt.
Thanks, Jimmy and Thaddeus. A lot of work over the last 2 years. Our recommendation tonight, as Thaddeus mentioned, is to move the locally preferred alternative 4, the express bus service from Brentwood to Antioch, forward for conceptual design. And that's our recommendation tonight. And I'd be glad to take any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, excuse me, Jimmy and Thaddeus for the great report. And I don't know if you can talk faster, but you talked very fast and got through that report in a lot of detail in a very quick amount of time. And so I will ask if there are commissioners who want to speak. And I see that Commissioner Worth's hand is raised. Any others, please raise your hand now. And
great.
I see.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you, Matt, and to your consulting team for that incredible report. You know, our goal always has been to get high quality transit to Brentwood. That, you know, that is, and really, and also one seat. You know, I know we do the Bay Point, but you know, obviously the E-BART to Bay Point, which you know is you know, the demand is huge. I guess a couple things that I just wanted to throw out there, and you know, we're dealing with a moving target these days, and I know Contra Costa has been an early advocate for bus on shoulder, and you mentioned the challenge of getting to, you know, crossing all those lanes, and it's just toxic for transit. It just eats time. So I guess my question to you all is, and it sounds like in doing your evaluation, you know, the dream would be to run E-BART to Brentwood. And I would be curious as to know what your number is. First of all, I think meeting the housing and the jobs targets will not be hard given the new RENA numbers. And I don't know if your numbers are based on the new RENA or just old planning. And that may make a difference in terms of at least, you know, meeting the density targets for a rail investment. You know, the challenge with rail, of course, is we need something now, not in 25 years. So I guess my next question is, did you look at, you talked about BRT, and one of the priorities that came out of the Blue Ribbon Task Force is in fact transit priority. I mean, this is a huge issue all over the Bay Area, given the fact that rail extensions are so expensive and they take so long. Really looking at express buses are key. So did you, you know, if it were possible, is there capacity to run bus on shoulder, and you could run it all the way from Brentwood to really to the Pittsburgh Bay Point station? Even though you'd have a little bit of redundancy along the E-BART line, we potentially could get a lot more riders if it was really one transfer as opposed to two. So did you, I guess a couple of questions, if I may, Madam Chair. First of all, did you look at that? Is there any way to do that in this Highway 4 corridor? Number one. Number two is, gosh, I just forgot what number two is. Well, I'll think of it later, Matt. But you know, I think we're working with Caltrans. That's going to be part of our advocacy platform at MTC to get opportunities for transit priority on all of these corridors. You talked about the transit priority on the arterials from Antioch down to the rail. And so I think, you know, it's going to take us as a region getting Caltrans to really consider it. It's been a struggle, as we all know. We've been in Sacramento for many years trying to get the BRT, trying to get the bus on shoulder concept moving forward. So, you know, is that something that's at all feasible? It not even, you know, if you could remove the administrative barriers to it, is this something we could consider?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Worth. Great questions. So in terms of bus on shoulder, we didn't specifically look at it as part of this project, and that was mainly, well, one, we were kind of letting the issues with CHP and others, the administrative issues as commission get worked out. However, in our preferred alternative, we didn't, in order for bus on shoulder to work correctly, or the way it's designed to work is when traffic slows to under 35 miles per hour, then the buses start going on the shoulder. We don't have that congestion between Brentwood and Antioch. So we didn't consider that for our locally preferred alternative. But however, we, as part of our design, conceptual design, we can look at whether that could be used through that corridor in the future, between Brentwood and Antioch. But we haven't studied it between Antioch and Bay Point in any detail, but I believe it was looked at as part of the SR4 design alternative assessment that was done by MTC and Ccta. So yes, if we were to go to Pittsburgh Bay Point, we would definitely look at it. For just Antioch, we don't think today it's necessary.
Got it. So the congestion really picks up between Antioch and Pittsburgh Bay Point. That's where it gets tough. So that's where the times go down.
And we did look at transit priority for the arterial alternative. We definitely looked at that. The real reason that that alternative didn't pan out was because the most direct route would be up a future Slatton Ranch Road.
Right.
And we had that with full transit priority, but it's a $35 million road that is yet to be constructed.
So ideally, you need transit priority. If you want to run all the way to Bay Point, we would need some kind of transit priority, Caltrans sanctioned. You'd have to get those modifications to run to really get the true express capacity.
Yeah, exactly what we're planning on 680. Yes.
Right. Exactly. Okay. And do you have O&D analysis that is really showing where these commuters need to go? So you got that. So demand. Yeah.
Yeah,
we did do an OD analysis. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
As part of our existing conditions, we bought streetlight data, so we knew exactly where those folks were coming from. So if they were coming from San Joaquin or where Discovery Bay or Oakley, we had a handle on that, and then where they're ultimately going to.
Well, once you get the design, we look forward. Federal and I will go and get that MTC checkbook to make this happen.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much.
Excuse me. So thank you, Commissioner Worth. So I saw Representative Allen's actual hand and then Commissioner Glover's virtual hand. So go ahead, Representative Allen.
Thank you. I'm channeling a little bit of Joel Keller here tonight, so bear with me. Some of the things that channel from him are things like, the hard work that he did for really decades to get the EBART extended just to Antioch. And, I came onto the BART board in 2017 and listened to the banter with Joel Keller and the San Francisco directors constantly telling him it will never work. It's going to be a disaster. Antioch is going to fall flat and EBART will never pay for itself. And from the very week that it opened, and then months later, it drastically exceeded anyone's wildest expectations as to the immediate ridership that was getting on the EBART trains. And, because these transit projects do take so long to plan, it's really hard for us to sit here, right? And I was on the board when we went through the same exercise in extending BART to Livermore. And I listened to people say, oh, it'll never work. There's not enough density and there's not this and there's not that. And ultimately, they're going to use some alternative out there. It's really a shame that there's not a seamless ride, because we know that every time that a rider has to get off of one mode and onto another mode, even when they do that, they have to do that with EBART. They have to get off of EBART and get onto, what we call Big BART. It diminishes the people who are willing to ride, and it also increases the time that they spend in their trip. And so with that, I guess I would like, my first question is, so what happens to the bigger plan of extending to Brentwood if we, you know, as again, channeling Joel Keller, if we settle, right? If Brentwood just settles for a fast bus that's from point A to BART and nothing in between, that'll speed that part of the trip up some. What happens to the rest of the plan?
Yeah, great question. I think, you know, we tried to carry the torch for Commissioner Keller and what he did over the years. And that's really what got us to this point is well, Joel's work. So you know, one of the main things we focused on for this study was, you know, how we could look at this through the lens of what can happen now and what can happen down the road. We agree with you that high capacity transit like a BART extension does work in this corridor, because I mean, our ridership numbers showed almost 4,000 riders from the Brentwood station, which is more than a lot of, or several existing BART stations today carry. So we agree with you that the ridership is there. We are up against these policies that MTC and BART have for their you know, their regional funding and the station area planning. So that is something we had to consider. But we wanted to move something forward that would allow for a near-term implementation. I mean, we're talking less than $10 million for the locally preferred alternative. We think that could be funded, you know, with, you know, relatively easily as compared to 250 million plus for the BART extension. But what we, as part of our recommendation, we are talking about, or we are recommending doing some of the conceptual design work on the actual BART extension, so we can, you know, look at the 160 pinch point, things like that are going to have to be looked at down the road whenever we do really start working on that BART extension. So if we can clear some of those things today and start looking at a near-term extension, we are, you know, setting the table for that BART extension in the future, and also creating those riding habits by getting those folks used to starting off their trip at Brentwood or somewhere beyond Brentwood and getting on to transit and getting that one seat ride to BART, and then their trip. You're establishing that habit that would only grow in the future. But we agree with you. There is a need for very high capacity transit today.
So thank you for that. But I'm not sure that I really heard the full answer to my question, which is, you know, is there a plan for you mentioned continuing to plan for that in the future. Is there a timeline for that continuing of developing the plan for the extension? Or is this something that will just sort of maybe lie in wait for a while until somebody from East County, you know, really jumps up and becomes the champion like Joel Keller did so many years ago and really drives it? And so I'm just wondering, do we have a specific timeline for more work in pushing that project forward?
So I may have to defer to our executive director on this one, but really, you know, when eBART opened up, our focus was on, you know, somehow getting high capacity transit out to Brentwood.
And I understand that need, and I agree that there's a need for that too. But I really would be very sad to see us put one in place of the other and then sort of, you know, move on to other things for a while. Okay, so I'm gonna let somebody try to come up with, is there a plan? And then I've got another question that maybe Matt, you can answer, and it really goes back to, and I believe that, you know, Commissioner Worth sort of touched on this, that the housing can be addressed, but I saw the slide and the numbers that you put up of what Brentwood's plan is right now and what they really need to achieve in order to get some excitement from MTC and from BART over, having achieved the housing numbers to really make the argument for championing that transit extension. And so my question to you is, and I don't know if there are any representatives of East County on the call that could answer this, but does Brentwood understand that they've got to plan for these numbers if they want the extension, and do they want it, I guess really is the question, if they're not planning for it.
What, 395?
So
yeah, so is Federal going to speak?
Maybe Federal can answer that.
I'll speak, but I want you to finish with your questioning for staff, and then I'll speak.
Yeah, so those were my two questions. Does Brentwood really want this? And then the other question is the plan moving forward? Is there a plan for a plan to move forward, or is it just sort of when it comes up again?
Yeah. I'll comment on the Brentwood plan. So we did sit down with City Manager Tim Ogden and his staff to talk to him about these issues, about the stationary planning. He was not intimately familiar with the stationary requirements that BART and MTC had, but they didn't seem overly concerned about it. They were, the Innovation Center is being planned by a developer, and the developer has certain plans. Now, that development certainly could handle additional development. There's a lot of, surface parking and things that could become housing. So we think that the opportunity is there for them to up zone or up densify that location. But they are aware of the issue. They don't seem overly concerned because I don't think they thought BART was going to arrive anytime soon anyways, but they would like to use high capacity transit service, whether it's BART or something else, as an attractor for the jobs at that location, because they want to pull, employees from the Central Bay Area to jobs in Far East County.
That's what I want to see, because there's so much capacity on BART,
right,
to move east in the morning and west at night. I mean, the trains are empty in those directions. Yeah. And so there's so much capacity for us to move workers in and out of Brentwood, that I guess I just would hope that there's more planning going on behind the scenes than what I know.
I would say that you're absolutely right, that the planning behind the scenes at the land use side is likely to be that catalyst that you're asking about, to find that champion, to really be the person who is pushing that land use conversation, working with the development community in Brentwood that escalates the proposed units, square footage, residential densities to the point where it demands the attention of BART. And that's really the most effective way, I would say, of moving that forward. So you were right when you said identifying that champion as a crucial step. I think having these initial conversations that Matt and others on our team have been having with BART in the last several, and Brentwood in the last several weeks, have helped to daylight some of those deficiencies. I'm going to call them deficiencies for lack of a better term right now. And I think developing an action plan strategically to continue working with the developer who's been producing the concept that we showed on the slide previously is really the most important next step to get that conversation catalyzed, let's say, further.
Thank you.
So,
I'll let Federal go now.
Okay, thank you.
So,
and,
yeah, Commissioner Glover.
Am I muted?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate this conversation because it's one that we continue to dive in and out of, and certainly the consistency of it is long overdue. But let me just say, it's not one or the other. I think that what we need to be able to do today is to put in systems that's going to be affordable and achievable within a short period of time. But as we continue to look at the fact that we need extensive transit to run throughout that East County corridor, we have to continue to plan. It's not just one-stop shop. So to your comments, Commissioner Allen, Joe had a number of champions. He had individuals working side by side with him when it came to EBART and other alternatives of transit. We have champions within this region and has had them for years. And so it's, once again, it's not one of it or the other. We have to continue to plan for transit alternatives, but whatever we could do up in the very near future to start to get more transit congestion relief, we need to do that immediately. So I would just say that in answer to your question, we have to continue planning, absolutely. But let's get an alternative that is affordable and that we can put in place right away as we continue to plan for continued relief. And I think that the Brentwood folks would raise their hand and agree in a minute. We had great champions from the city of Brentwood with Bob Taylor and Oakley with Kevin Romick for a number of years. And we've talked about these transit alternatives ongoing. But in terms of the presentation tonight, I think it's a great presentation, but we need to, it's not choose one or the other, but implement what we can to get in place today and continue to plan for what our needs are. I won't say future needs, our needs.
Okay,
hopefully that helps answer your question.
Well, it did, and I didn't mean to say that we would have to choose one or the other. I mean to say, sure, this is the short-term thing, but let's keep on going for the long-term thing. And I think we agree on that, Supervisor.
Absolutely.
Okay, so next we have Commissioner Hudson and then our Executive Director and then Commissioner Worth again.
I think federal just beat to death where I was going with this thing. I definitely think alternative 4 is the place to go at this time. Sure, you can have a lot of future help, but there's a lot of other people fighting for that money too. I've never seen anything get pushed so hard as the Peninsula Corridor. And I can tell you right now, many of the people that I'm dealing with are going to fight for money for Valley Link over BART extension to Brentwood. Because it's further along and it makes more sense at this time with the development. I look at the RENA numbers for the 4 cities in transplant. I don't think they equal Walnut Creek. So now you're through 2030. It's going to be difficult, but given the opportunity to make this alternative 4 work, will open some eyes. And that's what I saw with that. How many years did we go back to Washington, D.C. and we had to use that Metro bus for the Silver Line? All of us say, hey, this isn't so bad. Of course, we were a captive audience. But the reality here is tonight, I think we need to get this bus working and get it proven so that people will see that, yeah, the talk shouldn't be over. I mean, federal, you remember, we were sitting in there saying, we're going to have BART to Antioch. And then finally the light went on and said, no, we better do light BART or we're not going to have anything at this point. And we wouldn't if we didn't shift to light BART, light BART, whatever.
And I've been beating that drum forever, so it's not a new conversation to me. But whatever alternative we could get going right away is important as we continue to look at how we fund other transit projects.
Yeah. And federal's all for trading the money for the waterfront to go to EBART.
Okay, so our next, thank you very much for those comments. Our next speaker is Executive Director Hale, followed by Commissioner Worth. And if you want to speak on this item before we go to a vote, please raise your hand now. Tim?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. So Representative Worth will remember this very clearly. So when we were running down the hallways in Sacramento back in 2017, trying to negotiate Regional Measure 3, we actually got a line item in there for East Contra Costa Multimodal Center, right? So there's $15 million in there. And that was the whole intent, was to make this a hub in East Contra Costa County. And so the city of Brentwood needs to recognize that. BART needs to recognize that. And so we also have started our part in terms of constructing McCollum pedestrian overcrossing, right? So that's starting next year. So that's part of this kind of phased plan and approach to really get to that overarching goal. And I think relative to the long-term plans, there's really not a lot of planning we can do until we really address BART's policy in terms of extending BART. That's really the first thing. So really, this is BART needs to champion extending BART. And I mean, look what's happening with Valley Link. And so we need BART to really step up and say, we're going to expand our facilities, and they're not in a position to do that. And so there's really not going to be, I would say, any future plans until we can address that policy with BART to extend it in the future.
Yeah, I would say that BART never has any plans to extend. It is usually the community that drives it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Worth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the chance to speak again. First of all, I really want to pick up on one of the points that Matt made. He said, the thing about having high quality transit from Brentwood, into Antioch or Pittsburgh is you develop a habit of transit. And I really think that it would be very helpful, again, to have that slide at some point that compares what it costs for a rail extension to Brentwood in terms of money and time and how long it would take, just, ballparking it. And then doing the same thing with a bus rapid transit program, high quality. Those Tri-Delta buses are gorgeous, and you get on them and you have your own seat and Wi-Fi. It's kind of like the links that go into the city from WestCat. So I think if we could have the model, you compare the two, and it becomes very clear that if you want transit now, and a lot of times we're building EBART, there was a lot of comments from East County. People said, you know what, if we'd done BRT, we would have been in transit, decades before, but we have a hub of the rail. And I think given the fact that the transit priority, it would be wonderful if East County could be the model for the Bay Area's BRT transit priority on the freeways project, the first one, because they're still fighting in Marin County. And as Dave said, they're looking in the peninsula. They've got, they're trying to keep Caltrain going. And so this could really be a time when, if we were able to identify literally a trip from Brentwood to Bay Point, and then you get the funding to do the transit priority from Antioch to Pittsburgh, where from Antioch to Pittsburgh, where you really need it. I just think that might be an option that wasn't present, 6 months ago or a year ago. And then, of course, it doesn't preclude building rail down the road, in the future. I just think that it, given the ability of Tri-Delta to pivot and draw riders, I just think that really, I mean, obviously I would encourage option 4, but I do think there's some additional opportunities that exist that might be really beneficial to help us get those buses rolling, but having the data to compare the money and the time between the two options in a real simple slide, I think would be extremely helpful in terms of kind of making the case for this is what we need now. And obviously down the road, next generation, it doesn't preclude the rail extension. And then you build the links, you build the feeder lines to the rail, to the high capacity line. So whether it's rail or buses, the system starts to build out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Worth. Okay, so I had asked for you to raise your hand. I didn't see any hands raised. And so I want to move on to any public comments. And so Terry Ann, did we receive any written public comments on this item?
No, we have not received any written public comment.
And anyone who would, from the public who is here who would like to speak, please raise your hand now to speak to this item.
No public comments.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion. We have a recommendation from staff. We don't have a motion yet to seek approval for alternative 4 express bus to Antioch as recommended in the study, and to move it to cost refinement and conceptual design and advancing certain design elements of the higher cost alternative 1 Bay Area rapid transit rail extension. So
Move
do I
staff
have,
recommendation, Hudson.
thank you, Commissioner Hudson,
Second, Kelly.
and second by Vice Chair Kelly. And so Terry Ann, could you conduct a roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Butt?
Yes. Madam Chair, if
Commissioner
I
Glover?
could, to have an that amended somewhat in order to be inclusive, so that we have the language in there that we will continue the work in terms of the transit alternatives, also continue to work towards those. I just would like that language to be a part of this motion.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay,
So
and
if
so go ahead.
So if the maker would allow that.
I'm fine with it. I'm just waiting federal to see if staff's gonna say, "Meh," but no, it sounds like what we do, whether I moved it or not, but yeah, let's include it.
And I was going to say that staff heard the message that Commissioner Worth was moving forward, but if we want it to be as part of a motion, then, and thank you, Commissioner Hudson. Vice Chair Kelly, are you amenable to that?
Yes, I'm on board with that.
Okay, thank you. And so
Keep
now,
looking through, Terry Ann.
Terry Ann, will you conduct the roll call vote?
Well, I'm going to start over. Commissioner Butt?
Flustered her.
Yeah. Yes.
Commissioner Glover?
Yes.
Commissioner Haskew?
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak is absent. I believe Commissioner Thorpe is absent. Okay. Commissioner White?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
Chair Geringer?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioners Arnridge, Nowak, and Thorpe absent.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for the great discussion. And again, to Matt and Jimmy and Thaddeus for all of the work that you have done to this point and the work that you will be doing over the next couple of months to continue to move this forward. And I do want to say that in terms of the and this is a point of personal privilege, you bringing my day job into this, but I know that Supervisor Burgess' office served on the study, and Alicia Knuckles, I believe, was the representative there, and that this is a priority to Supervisor Burgess as well in bringing jobs to East County and Far East County and getting people out of their cars. And so for those who don't know, I actually by day work with Supervisor Burgess in District 3. So with that, we will move on to the next agenda item, and I need to pull my notes back up.
And while you're doing that, Teresa,
Thank you.
I'd like us to recognize that you are the new mayor of Lafayette. I know a lot of changeover happened this month, but congratulations.
Thank you. And perfect timing to, stall for me to log back into my, so our next item is a public hearing item related to the approval of the 2021 update of the Contra Costa Congestion Management Program. And we will begin this item with a presentation by Matt Kelly.
Gosh, I thought I was done for a minute.
I know, and you got your screen turned off just for that second, and welcome back.
Thank you, Chair Geringer. Good evening, Matt Kelly, CCTA, here tonight to present the proposed adoption of the 2021 Congestion Management Program for Contra Costa. As you all know, you've all heard me say this time and time again, This is a required exercise that we do, required by the state under Prop 111, passed back in 1991. And at that time, based upon the existing Contra Costa Measure C growth management program. So the state CMP legislation is based on our own policy, internal policy. So for that reason, we defer to the activities of the growth management program to fulfill most of the requirements of the CMP. So we do focus on a couple of items that are required. That is the monitoring of the CMP system. So we monitor 65 intersections and the freeway system for its level of service every 2 years. We also collect bike and pedestrian counts at all of those locations. We also updated our capital improvement program, which is a list, an unconstrained list of projects. So we underwent an overhaul of that over the last few months. And really the MTC guidance for this update was to keep it technical and really focus on revisions on changes that have occurred in the transportation environment and in Contra Costa since 2019. So that's what we've done. We've, in your packet is the executive summary of the 2021 CMP. Our recommendation tonight is to adopt the CMP under resolution 21-46-G. I'm trying to remember from memory, and submit the final 2021 CMP to MTC. MTC adopts all the Bay Area's CMPs together. So that is my recommendation tonight, and that will occur under public hearing.
Okay, excuse me. Before I open the public hearing, are there any comments from board members, commissioners? I don't see any hands raised. And so I am now opening the public hearing for anyone wanting to make a comment on the 2021 Congestion Management Program update. If anyone would like to speak to this item, please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any. Are you, Terry Ann?
No, I have no written public comment, and I don't see any verbal comments as well.
Thank you. I was going to ask about the written public comment next, so thank you for doing that. So last call for any final comments from the commissioners and also from the public.
Madam Chair, I move to close the public comment and accept staff's recommendations on the 2021 congestion management plan program.
Perfect. The public hearing has been closed. We have a motion from Commissioner Mitchoff and a second from Commissioner Hudson. Terry Ann, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Butt?
Yes.
Commissioner Glover?
Yes.
Commissioner Haskew?
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
Chair Geringer?
Yes.
Yeah, it looks like motion passes unanimously with Commissioners Arnridge, Noack, and Thorpe absent.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Matt. And now you can turn off your screen and go hide behind your name. So thank you very, very much for all the work on that. And we will move on now to correspondence and communications. We have no correspondence letters in the packet, but you did receive some handouts from Terry Ann earlier this evening that had a couple of, oh no, those were associated committee reports. Scratch that, no correspondence. Moving on to number 11, we did receive committee reports in the handout, and I am sure you have all read those already. And we will move on to agenda item number 12, authority board and staff comments. I don't have any comments this evening, and so we will move on to commissioners and ex officio representatives comments and reports on activities. So any updates from commissioners? And Commissioner Hudson, first of all,
Queen's wave.
I like the Queen's wave on that. So
I'm thinking about a parade.
Go ahead.
Yeah, last night our city council unanimously voted to pay a lot of money for a bridge going over Bollinger Canyon Road. I specifically want to direct this at Tim. We voted to keep the stairs in, which would cost more money, and we'd like to keep lights on the bridge. We feel that thing's pretty iconic. But what did come as some news, apparently Tri-Valley Transportation Committee has voted this project #1 on their CIP list. So there hopefully will be more money available to that. I was looking at how the financing, there's no money yet, financing broke down. And I was a little shocked that I thought we were getting more money from the Air District. I guess once you leave the chairmanship, they kind of forget about you. What they didn't realize is the new chair of Bay Area Air Quality Management District is Karen Mitchoff, and she will make it her personal point of view to make sure we get twice the amount of money. But looking at this project that Habib showed us tonight, and I'm thinking, if you just get ahead of the way things are done, there's a perfect spot for it, because the money we got from the Air District was for a dedicated lane for bikes, and it will work for the same projects that we're talking about here. And I'm just wondering if it isn't time, Tim, if you get a chance to call or email, to go back to Karen Skolnick or Damian Breen and say, hey, 390,000 just isn't going to get it. You got to put a 1 or a 2 in front of that 3, and see if we can go some solar on that. It's a southern facing bridge on the southern face. But I hope we can start on that next year. I think that this is just from here forward. It's who can produce and who can get the money to do it. There seems to be a lot out there. So it's really looking good for 2022.
Great, thank you. And while others are raising their hand to give any commissioner reports or representative reports, as a commissioner, I would like to announce that the City of Lafayette at our November meeting did adopt a Vision Zero policy. And I want to thank CCTA staff, Colin and Tim and others who helped with that. And so Supervisor, Commissioner, Chair, Mitchoff, a lot of titles. So.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Hudson reminded me, one of the quote unquote perks of being the chair is you get to have the agencies retreat in your district. And so I would invite any of you who are interested. We're going to do it as a hybrid. It will be at the Pleasant Hill Community Center on January 19th. So the Air Board will be holding its annual retreat there. And there really is a lot of synergy with things going on between transportation and air quality. And Tim, I see you shaking your head, but if you and or any of your colleagues at CCTA wish to, it's just down the street, but there's also the possibility of Zoom. And of course, all my colleagues, board members on here would be more than welcome to attend and hear about that. Thank you for that opportunity to invite you all.
And while we're adding all kinds of chairs to Supervisor Mitchoff, she will be also becoming chair in January of the Contra Costa Board of Supervisors. So congratulations on that as well. So I believe that Commissioner or Representative Worth would like to update us on MTC.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, as I've indicated earlier on Matt's study item, we are looking at it. We're now at the phase of implementing the Blue Ribbon Task Force recommendations, which really the goal is getting people back on transit. So transit's a priority is one of the key initiatives, along with fare integration and coordination. And so our operators have already been, kind of working on that. I've been working with CCTA staff with regards to OBAG 3. And the proposal is to increase the funding that will go directly back to the counties for allocation from 45 to 50%. And we're just working on what are the requirements of those and working so that the requirements we ultimately adopt will be ones that will be beneficial to Contra Costa County, that will be able to implement in terms of all the goals that, that we have in our cities and in our county. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So any other commissioner or representative reports? And Representative Allen.
Thank you. I just want to congratulate you, Mayor Geringer, and all of the others, Supervisor Mitchoff and others who are all getting new leadership positions in 2022. I chaired my last audit committee yesterday. Tomorrow is our last BART meeting of the year, so I'm excited to move into to what's ahead for 22. Ridership is slowly returning to BART. A few percentage points every month. I believe last month we ended at 32% of pre-pandemic level. And I'm sorry, 30%. And it looks like we're gonna hit around 32. We've been bouncing off of 32% the last couple of weeks. So slowly returning. I continue to get really good reports from riders saying, hey, we're really happy with the cleanliness and it seems to be better than the ride they had before the pandemic. I just want to, there's not a whole lot of other things going on at BART except we elect a new chair tomorrow. So thank you.
Great. And I want to, while we're going through this, I believe that Newell Arnerich, who is not here tonight, is mayor, and I want to congratulate Holland White, who is now the mayor of Pittsburgh, and I look forward to working with all the mayors. And yes, a big round of applause for all the leadership changes. And Supervisor Glover, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that District 5 wasn't left out with Mayor Kelly from Hercules, our vice chair, and that Holland White was also chosen by his council to serve as mayor. So we didn't want to leave District 5 out.
No, thank you.
You mean we?
And if I could, I'm sorry to interrupt without raising my hand.
That's okay.
Thank all of those who served as mayors and are moving back to regular status, like Mayor Worth, and I'm just not sure of other colleagues, because you did a great job. I'm sure you're looking forward to a little bit of quote unquote normalcy. Amy did a great job as mayor of Orinda.
When the baton gets passed, you kind of go, okay.
She did a great job again. So if somebody on this Zoom meeting has not felt the love about promotions or any exciting news, please raise your hand, because we want to make sure that everyone is appreciated. Okay, so we will move on to the Friendly Executive Director's Report. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I really appreciate all the wonderful comments in the last year that we've had and looking forward to 2022. And I think, next year there's a lot of exciting things, and particularly in some of the new roles of all of you. I'm really excited to work with you individually to kind of continue to meet our goals for 2022. I know Commissioner Mischoff and I have already started talking about Momentum tours for Air District next year to see glideways and other things that are happening out of Momentum Station. And speaking of which, I know I sent an email out to all of you, but just to kind of reiterate, we did host Congressman DeSaulnier out at Momentum Station about 3 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
And he was kind of officially kind of the last tour that we're doing at Momentum Station. And this is allowing glideways to really move forward in their, I call it glideways 2.0, but this is to build their loop at Momentum Station and start actually testing multiple vehicles and actually testing fleets. And so that's gonna be really exciting. And once that proof of concept is up and running, which Madam Chair Geringer mentioned February, March timeframe, we will commence tours with all of you. And I apologize that some of you did not get out there this year, but it's my goal to make sure that each and every one of you have an opportunity to see what's happening out at Glideways. And we just want to make sure it's the right time and you have a good experience. I guess the other thing is the Moving San Francisco documentary aired. And if you haven't had a chance to look at that, I thought it was wonderfully done. I've already personally watched it twice. And so as a kind of a transportation geek, I guess you could say. And so if you have an opportunity to look at it, it's on demand. The link is in the executive director's report. I also emailed it out as well. And then just to let all you know, I'm not going to go through all of it. Just I want to keep my comments somewhat brief, but we continue to be invited to speak at conferences. And that's really important, as you all know, to be able to talk about what we're doing and how we're promoting CCTA out there in the world. Particularly, we have had opportunities to speak in Japan and in North Carolina, ITS America, and so it's really important that we're doing those things, and staff is also out there doing those things to really promote CCTA. And then lastly, I was just really inspired by the Representative Congressman Elaine O'Kane-Tauscher's memorial dedications. And I was just really inspired by the work that she did here in Contra Costa County. And so if you haven't seen it, there is a sign out there. Yeah. The entire Caldecott Tunnel was dedicated to Congresswoman Tauscher based on her contributions to Caldecott Tunnel and the $200 million that she was able to get out of ARA for the project, and also other projects in Contra Costa County. And I tried to get my hands on the video to play for the board, but it had some personal photos in there, and they wanted to keep that video personal. But I think it was just it was really, really well done. And then I think lastly, you should have received the notice for a special board meeting on January 5th. And that's to make sure we're complying with AB 361. And lastly, just happy holidays, happy new year. Normally we would have a nice little holiday gathering after the board meeting to see everyone, but unfortunately we can't do that. So I am looking forward, hopefully, to seeing all of you in person next year. Hopefully eventually we'll be moving to actual in-person public meetings sometime next year. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So moving on to agenda item 13, the calendars are all provided in your packet. We will now convene into a closed session to consider two items. The first will be a conference with legal counsel to consider settlement agreements with the URS Corporation and the Hanna Group on the I-80 San Pablo Dam Road interchange. The second item will be a performance evaluation and conference with labor negotiators for Timothy Hale, the authority's executive director, and we will reconvene at the end to report out on both items. And so Terry Ann will handle moving us to closed session.
Okay, I have the room ready to go, and I'm going to go ahead and open it now.
Okay, and so everyone just clicks join.
Can we go eat?
Yeah, you can't. Let me pause this really quick.
Good night. Session, and I want to report that we took action to approve settlement agreements with URS Corporation and the Hanna Group, and it was a unanimous vote to do that in closed session. And then on agenda item B in closed session for the public employee performance evaluation pursuant to Government Code 54957 regarding the executive director. We also took unanimous action to approve a 6% increase to the executive director's salary. And that was also, if I didn't say it, I'll say it again, it was a unanimous vote. And so I believe that was the only items we have to report out. We all just unanimously appreciate you very much, Executive Director Hale.
Thank you.
And I'm sure the ones who aren't here tonight also agree with that. And so thank you for all that you do and will continue to do in the new year. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting. I do want to say happy holidays to, I should have said it during my chair report when we had a big, huge crowd, but I very much wish all of you the happy holidays and look forward to seeing you again in 2022.
Did you say a big, huge crowd?
hey, you caught the humor. Okay. And so we're
Happy
adjourned.
holidays.
Thank
Lovely
you.
to see all of you.
Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.
Bye.